Yes, sir. We have it. Welcome back. Mind Bully Podcast, a podcast focused on beating the hell out of your negative voice. This guest here, this podcast here, this time here is a new day, and I'm excited for the guest I have today. Honestly, it's a moment that I'm actually really excited for because this is a person joining me today that I really admire how he moves just as a person. Forget what he does with his professional life, but as a person, who he is in his community, who he is as a father, who he is for the game. So saying all that, welcome Mr. Reggie Hearn to the Mind Bully Podcast.
Thank you, sir. Quite an introduction.
Yeah, it's the truth, though. I think it's admirable, just kind of even reading your story from walk-on to USA Men's Basketball Player of the Year. It's fire to know that you can become something greater than even what you thought you were going to even think to become before. And not even only that, your journey and your faith and how open you are about your faith, it's really inspiring. That's kind of a thing that's not out there all the time. Guys might think the same ways, feel the same ways, but they don't go the extra step to actually voice it. I think you voicing it is courage, and it gives strength to a lot of people. So thank you again for joining the show.
Absolutely, man. I just want to say real quick, I'm excited to be on. When I heard about your podcast, I was like, man, this is something that I don't feel like I have the tech savvy, and even the youthful spirit to join the podcast game and get out here and talk about these things. But the Mind Bully podcast has incredible relevance for my story, where I've been. So you doing this and providing a platform to tell my story is really powerful.
Love,
so,
bro.
kudos to
I
you.
definitely think you do from looking at your pandemic ponderings, but that's another thing. But how I start these episodes, bro, is I take it back and I go back. I think a good stage setter for episodes like this and stories like this in general is just childhood, the formative years, because they do bring up, the traits that you had then that makes you who you are now. So if you would walk me back to your early days, what was that kid like, and who did he think he was going to become?
Early Reggie. Earliest memory I have, to start off the rip, being open and vulnerable, is my parents sitting me down in our backyard on the backyard picnic table and telling me that they were separating. Dad was going to live somewhere else. Mom was going to stay in the house, and I was going to be going back and forth between them. And so that was really interesting growing up. As I reflect back on it now, I feel like it prepared me for adulthood in the sense of I feel like I can move in and out of different situations, different cultures, and fit right in. There's a different culture at mom's house. There's a different lifestyle at dad's house, different ways of communication that affected me in various ways, but it enabled me to be where I am now, which is, like I said, moving in and out. My mom was a teacher. My dad worked with youth as a youth counselor in my early years. They instilled the importance of education into me, so I wanted to be a student, the best student possible. I remember crying when I got my first B in fourth grade, and it was in citizenship too, which I thought I was a great citizen.
I know you could get a B in citizenship.
Yeah, I was crying in my mom's lap. Man, I didn't even know citizenship was a real subject. But yeah, so, that was a huge focus of mine. I love the game of basketball, so I wanted to be great at that. Honestly, my greatest goal, Norense, was perfectionism. I wanted to be perfect. And I couldn't have told you what the definition of perfect was. I just wanted to be absolutely great. And honestly, that was my coping mechanism. I was kind of a nerd growing up. I had the glasses. I got called Four Eyes. I didn't really feel like I had very many good friends. Finally, once I got to high school, I could say I had a few like real friends, but middle school, I really struggled. I didn't feel like any girls liked me, anything like that. I was just, the nerdy kid who was decently athletic, but, nothing crazy. And so perfectionism was kind of my way out. That's how I found value and worth. If I'm an absolutely great student, and if I become an absolutely great athlete, and if I treat everybody as great as possible, and therefore have a great reputation, like that's how I'm going to find worth. That's how I'm going to find value. a good family friend of ours growing up said everybody respects excellence. So I was like, if I am excellent, I'll be loved, I'll be respected. And I couldn't have articulated this to you when I was a
Yeah.
kid.
Yeah.
I can look back on it and say, oh, that was my motivation. As a kid, no, I'm just
But
like,
then not
yeah.
to cut you off, but like for you to jump in, that's one thing in itself. It shows your growth. But if you were behind the eyes of that kid, when your parents did sit you down and tell you, okay, they're splitting up, if you could take yourself there and walk me through that day in Fort Wayne, Indiana, when you're just a kid, you see what the family household has always been that you're, used to, accustomed to, that you lived through, and your situation where you go to school, you see what a family is. They talk about their mom, dad together. You see, that unit strong, and they sit you down and they say they're splitting up. What did you feel in that moment?
um, Confusion, sadness. Um, yeah, that's the thing is I remember the emotions. I can picture it in my mind.
What's that picture like?
Well, I can just picture the backyard. The grass was green. We had our no offense to my parents, but we had the rickety playground set further back in the backyard, and they just sat me down right there. They just shared the news with me, and I just remember being confused. I mean, like, what do you mean, mommy and daddy aren't living in the same house? Like, as a 5-year old, like, what do you mean? You know?
What happened next though? Because again, it all these faint memories that we have. For me, when I was growing up, I was
Hmm.
sexually assaulted by older women in my life, and when it happened, I didn't, I thought it was just okay, this is just a thing that happens to everybody. Then I start looking around after the first time it happened. I'm like, okay, it's not happening to anybody else but me in my area. Like I'm the sweet one. So I was like,
Mm.
long story short, because of what happened, I started, taking my own assumption or taking what it meant to me and started equating that to my worth. Like you said, you battle with feeling those worth issues as well. I took, okay, I'm less than, I'm insignificant because of what happened to me. Because of what happened as your parents splitting up, what do you think that kid was telling himself about what happened?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. To be honest, I've never really thought about it. I think what my parents did a great job of backtracking a little bit in college. I took a kind of family relations class and studied a little bit children of divorce. A couple of the things that children of divorce really struggle with is feeling like they're maybe not as loved or when divorce happens. And number two, feeling like it's their fault. I feel like my parents, especially in the early stages, did a great job of letting me know that their split had no effect on how much they loved me. And it wasn't just their words, I could feel it. And number two, that it wasn't my fault. Looking back as a kid and, the first few weeks, months, years after that, I can't say that I felt anything personally that I was aware of that was incredibly negative, except for the fact of just being massively confused.
Yeah. I was just curious because it's like in that time, we all picture things, and I don't know what it feels like to go through that situation. But I was without my dad from age 8 to 18 because he was in Nigeria and he got his visa denied.
Mm,
And because of what happened,
wow.
one to me and two to him, as a kid, you think everything's about you and like you're almost narcissistic in your ways. Like you equate everything. Okay, it must be me. I somehow thought, okay, like I'm insignificant
Hmm.
because of what happened. Like he's away. Oh shit. And I go to school. Everybody's like, where your dad at? Where your dad at? Everybody got their dad coming to the games and I don't. I'm just like, all right, I must be less than. For your story,
Mm.
just switching gears a little bit, I do want to know about your siblings and that kind of family unit. What are your siblings like?
Yeah. So, first sister that I had, when I was 5 years old, my mom and dad had a second child. She died after 7 months. Her name was Madison Marie. Um, yeah, I have some fond, very vague memories of her. But obviously, that rocked the family for the next 3-4 years. I was a single child, and my dad remarried to my now stepmom, and they had a baby girl. So I got a younger sister. named Sydney. And it was kind of hard for us to fully bond because ever since my parents' separation, it's 50-50. I'm with my dad 50% of the time, with my mom 50% of the time. And then Sydney's 8.5 years younger than me. So, by the time I'm in high school, she's still 4 or 5 years old. They hadn't even moved in with us at the time she was born. They didn't move in until later. So, only seeing my sister 50% of the time, and then I'm kind of significantly older. It was hard for us to, I think fully connect like a lot of brothers and sisters do.
Right.
We still have a good bond. I think we can talk deeply, when we do talk, but we both kind of are like, yeah, we talk when we talk, and it's good when we do talk. But just, it's kind of hard with the circumstances for us to have a super, super deep
Yeah. Thank
connection.
you for sharing that. That's powerful in itself. But I would ask you, where did you gain that connection then? Because okay, your parents are strong people. They place values in you. They're both pouring into you. Like you said, you learn something at your dad's house, you go to your mama's house, you learn something. You're learning how to deal with different situations at an early age, dealing with ambiguity. A lot of people can't do that now. You learn at that age, like you're learning traits that will help you later on.
Right.
A lot of people, they go through certain situations and to each his own, but like you took that situation and turned it on its head for your good. And some people can't do that. For you to be able to do that, I just sidetrack. I think like that's powerful in itself, but it's like, where does that even come from? Because it's like, if I was you in your shoes, I wouldn't know how I would do all this, from dealing with the loss of a family member affecting the home, your parents split affecting the home, like your age is above your siblings, so you don't have that tied connection. You're almost like a lone wolf out here, and you're chasing a dream. Later on, we'll get into that, but where does that come from? That drive to just have the positive perspective, to keep moving forward.
Yeah. To be honest, I wouldn't always say it was a positive perspective that I had. I think, like I said, I lost myself in perfectionism. Okay, my way to find worth and value, my way to find purpose, my way forward is perfection. As a student, as an athlete, morally, I was that kid that, I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, um, didn't have sex in high school. To be honest, I was a virgin until I got married somehow. Didn't mean I messed around, it didn't mean I didn't mess around in college, but um, was able to give that to, my give my virginity to my wife,
Beautiful.
which is really cool. Um, but even that decision was, I got to be a good guy. I got to be a good guy, and that's how, I'll find my way.
Sorry, not to cut you off, but bro, that I
It's a whole
think,
nother conversation.
I think it's crazy because I always say this in adolescence, from age 8 to 18, we're extremely impressionable. As we're going to the school, for me, I'm a Nigerian immigrant. I'm a twin. I thought that I was less than. I'm going to the school trying to be somebody else and trying to find significance. So that means doing the wrong things, into the wrong kind of culture, fight and all this stuff, when I'm not that kid. But looking back, I'm like, I'm probably searching for connection. I'm searching for attention. I want that. I'm real impressionable, trying to be like everybody else, even though that's not who I am. For you to say that, I wasn't always positive, but you didn't do any of the other things that kids are doing. I'm like, what? I'm trying to think, like, what was that stage like for you in those adolescent years? Like, you're searching for your identity, you're searching for perfection, but, you have the values of, what hard works look like, what's grinding, what's discipline, what's perfection of your parents and your siblings and the family member that told you, okay, you got to be that way. But you have your own beliefs now in adolescence of how to attain that. What kind of made you think one way, or as I kind of formed this question, because I'm really curious, it's like, what self-narrative was that kid telling himself that he could become with the game of basketball, with himself, with academics? Who did you think you could become because of that mindset that you had?
Well, even as you're saying all that, you're kind of helping me talk through it. I think early on, my parents' approval was very important to me. And I knew that, if I had success in school, I had success in basketball, whatever I put my hand to, if I was kind to people, morally good, that would bring approval from my parents. And that's not to say that I feared not having their approval if I didn't go the other way. Like, if that makes
Right.
sense, I didn't feel like my parents' approval of me hinged on my performance, but I wanted it. How it translated, I think, especially as I got into high school, I'll tell you a little story. So I had the glasses, and they were like green rimmed, very big. Like, the rims looked like a turtle shell. Like I had the buck teeth, I had the gap, like I had it all, man. So freshman year comes, I get the contacts, so he don't got the glasses anymore. Shedding a little bit of the nerd. At the beginning of my sophomore year, my dad challenges me, in the sense of sports, well, really basketball. And he says, "Son, like, if you want to take your game to the next level, you really got to get stronger. You really need to work out with the football team." Probably 90-95% forced me to work out with the football team. Now, the high school I went to, Fort Wayne Snyder in Fort Wayne, Indiana, perennially a contender, at the state level in football. Their weightlifting program was sick. I'm in there doing Olympic power cleans, all sorts of crazy stuff, like working with tires, the whole, I mean, the weight junkies, the fitness heads on here, whoever listens to your podcast, they know what I'm talking about. We're doing crazy stuff. Now my body starts filling out, bro. And then by the start of my sophomore year, I started year on JV. By the end of the year, I'm starting varsity, right? So, okay, I shed the glasses. My body's starting to fill out. I'm starting to come into my own looks wise because, keep it real. Like, I think I have good genes, like that. So I've been
What's
told.
up, King? Talk,
Okay,
yeah.
so I'm keeping it real. So, I don't think I'm the best looking guy in the world, but, the point is I started getting a lot of attention from girls. All my teachers were raving about me. So what used to be my parents' approval now has become, oh, okay, because of my pursuit of perfection and finding worth and value in the classroom, on the court, trying to treat people the right way, like be morally good. Look at all the attention I'm getting now. Like, I remember my dad sat me down one day. I came home and I said to my dad, he loves telling this story. He's like, "Yeah, son, you said to me, Daddy, girls don't like me." And he told me, he's like, "Son, just keep doing what you're doing in the classroom. Keep doing your thing on the basketball court. I promise you the girls will come." And started getting more attention. High school, freshman, sophomore, junior. To my senior year, we went to state. We didn't win on the basketball court, but we were there. I finished, like, I think fourth in my class academically, got voted in the senior awards most likely to succeed, and was in the running for all these other awards. So I'm seeing, man, this success, this pursuit of perfection has led to accomplishment. And that's what America is built on, accomplishment, the American dream. This is how you fulfill yourself, accomplish, achieve. Okay, I did that. I maximized what I had. So, in answer to your question, like, I started to see the self narrative I was telling myself is, dang, my dad was right. Like, I just keep doing this, and attention and approval, and dang, I'm not the nerd anymore. Like, I don't get made fun of like that. The people who used to make fun of me, they're eating their words now. And, I wouldn't outwardly say that to people, but I was feeling myself. I was feeling myself by the end of high school, because that self narrative of pursuing perfection in all aspects of life, pursuing achievement, it was working, and I was getting attention. I was getting approval. And that equated to me at the time as, oh, I now have worth. I now have value. I am now loved. I am now accepted. That got blown up when God came into my life. But at the time, it was the guardian of my soul, so to speak, until God could come in and really fill the void, like, for real.
God came in and filled the void.
If that makes
I
sense.
always say our beliefs are like our cognitive contact lenses to where we see the world. and we're looking for evidence.
Mm.
Okay, wait, I'm good at hoop.
Mhm.
They see me, I'm good at hoop. That gives me acceptance, approval. Like that
Right.
that means I'm significant. Shit, I'm gonna lock into
Right.
being a basketball player. You keep going, and you take that kid that lifted weights with
Right.
the Snyder all time, big weights, the weight champions of the world. You take from that kid with that mindset, with that belief, you turn it to a basketball career. You move on, you play in high school, and you have a decision. You're an undersized post player, and you're not recruited well. Like you're under recruited, and you have offers to a D2 school to go, or you could choose a route to be a walk on at a Butler, at a Northwestern, at a Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
In my head, if I was in your shoes at Snyder High School, and I know my daddy wanted me to lift weights to become this basketball player, to become this pro, shit, I'm gonna take a full ride, because it's like, here, that's acceptance, that's approval. What were the steps that made you go the other route, the road less traveled, the tougher route, the more tiresome route to become a walk-on at a Northwestern?
If I'm gonna play, I want to play at the highest level. I watched March Madness. I watched the NBA. Those guys, at least from my young eyes, they're loved, man. They found value and worth because look at them, man. They're on the court. They're doing their thing. They've arrived. Why would I not try to go to the highest level? And for me, again, it was the combination of academics and athletics. So that's why there's the Butler, there's the Notre Dame, there's the Northwestern. Applied to get into Harvard, didn't get in. Was a little emotional about that. Because, right, Harvard is the highest level of academics. Oh, what if I could, get a degree from there and also play Division I? Shoot. But how it went down is, I took visits to Butler, Notre Dame, and Northwestern. Butler at the time, for those who are real basketball heads, this is right before the 2009-2010 season, right before their 2-year run back-to-back to the championship of March Madness. So I did not get a chance to be a part of that. I was told at the time they weren't taking walk-ons. So didn't even get to talk to Coach Brad Stevens or anybody at the time. So Butler wasn't taking walk-ons. And then Notre Dame said, once you get on campus, let us know. We'll have you come in for a tryout. But Northwestern, interestingly enough, the assistant coach at the time was Mitch Henderson, who just led Princeton to the Sweet 16 in March Madness. So he was the assistant coach at Northwestern. He sat me down. They looked at my game tape. My mom and I visited. He sat me down on the edge of the court. Never forget it. He said, hey, you're a little bit better than we thought. You can shoot the ball a little better than we thought. We think you could add value to the program. But, to be honest with you probably won't play until your junior year, just being honest and candid. But nobody else has said that to me. So I see light. I see hope. I see, okay, they think I could actually help the program. Bet.
It's funny because, kind of leading on, you go from that kid, walk on, and you become this player to where it's like, okay, I'm actually better than I thought. I'm in this atmosphere and I'm really good. I'm a really good player, but I'm not playing. Freshman year, sophomore year, I'm barely playing. You played a total of 72 minutes in 2 seasons. If anybody doesn't know the game of basketball, there's 2 halves in college, 20 minutes, and there's 40 minutes in a game. You play 2 games, that's 80 minutes. A total of 72 minutes in 2 seasons, knowing that you're a skilled player. You work hard from weights in the morning to going to class, to coming back, to study hall, to another shooting session, to a practice session, probably practice player, going over their plays over and over. And I'm probably killing these guys in practice, but then I don't play. What did that feel like? Because it's like you waited your turn. You turned into this person paired from that kid from Fort Wayne, going through all that in his childhood. Then you said, okay, acceptance, approval. Yes, that's what your drive has been this whole time. And you got it when you strive and you were perfect in high school, so to speak. And you got it when you finally got on a team, you got on scholarship. But did you feel like you didn't have it when you weren't playing meaningful minutes during that time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think looking back, I think I knew it was going to take time, especially after what Coach Henderson told me.
You
As you can see,
believe them though?
I held
Like
on to that
you're a
for years.
competitor though. As you, I'm thinking like, yeah, you
Mhm.
talking about junior year. I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna show you. So did you believe that?
I think honestly, I did not expect to play my freshman year, but I did think if I work hard, there could be a chance my sophomore year. I did think that. But my freshman year, I was like, yeah, I really struggled with confidence. Um, early in high school, then as I showed myself I could play, I gained more confidence to where by my senior year, I was a pretty confident player. But then going off into some of the camps I got invited to my senior year, playing against some of the other best guys in the state, and I was scared. Now going into college against guys on scholarship, there was real fear. There was real lack of confidence. And for me, my fight or flight response was flight. I it always was flight. So I would kind of go into myself. It took a lot for me to overcome my fears on the court. So getting back to the point, my freshman year, I had that. I was working through that. I felt like I had realistic expectations. I probably won't play my freshman year, but after that, get my feet wet. I feel like there's a chance. But it ended up being really, really hard, man. I felt like I worked hard my freshman year, did a really good job. I was a practice player. I was on the scout team, which honestly was a great way to improve my game. I'm emulating some of the best guards in the Big Ten. I get to do what I want.
Yeah.
Get your shots up. Yo, Reg, Kalen Lucas from Michigan State, Demetri McCamey from Illinois. Some of the best guys in the Big Ten. Taylor Battle. Go beat them. Get shots up, Reg. Bet. Let me experiment with my bag that I didn't really have. But sophomore year comes around, and some of the better guys on the team are telling me like, Reg, you pretty good. Like you should be playing with us. A few of the coaches, Coach Henderson included, who had told me I probably wouldn't play until my junior year. At different times throughout the year, every assistant coach said something to me at least once about being ready to play. You might play tonight, yada, yada, yada. Never happened. So that was hard because now I was getting that key word approval from teammates, from coaches. So that was helping to silence the fears and the doubts and my own mind bully about being able to play. But then coach still doesn't put me in. The head coach, who's the decision maker. So that's hard, right? That feeds into the negative part of the mind. And quite honestly, after my sophomore year, I was thinking about quitting. The
Really?
only reason I didn't, oh, absolutely. My best friend at the time was also a walk-on. His name was Austin Nichols. He quit after our sophomore year. Pre-med, he had a heavy course load. He didn't have a scholarship, so he's like, what am I doing? Like spending all this time. We would be like joking with each other on the bench, talking about how we don't get to play, how we're killing dudes in practice, all these different things. So that's my running mate. He's gone.
I'm really listening to you
Mm-hmm.
speak on your story, and like I'm almost seeing myself in your story when
Yeah.
you're kind of speaking on the external approval
Okay.
that you've always chased, and we spoke to at length on this. But even in the game, when it's your game, like okay, because they're saying these things, I'm confident or I feel confident. For me, it's the same way. I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of people even listening, it's the same way. Whatever they do, it's like the thing that they're chasing that gives them worth, that gives them meaning, that gives them purpose. They want to be so great, but they're not free to expand all of themselves. You talked about fear playing the game. I definitely, like, if I'm in my moments, I'm thinking, okay, I know I'm way more skilled than I show on the court. If I'm shooting, I don't shoot threes. I play my role. I only do that. When you speak about your fear in that time, was it ever a moment where you finally believe like, I'm a great basketball player? Despite all this, my friend quit. If they say I suck or not, like I'm actually a great basketball player.
Yeah, that's a good question. And actually, I can get right back to where I was in the story and answer that. So my friend quits after sophomore year, junior year starting. I thinking about quitting. The only reason I didn't is because I had a scholarship. So that's a lot of
Yeah,
dollar
facts.
signs. Those are good reasons. So the beginning of the year starts. two of the guys in front of me, two of the guards got injured. There was one other senior who apparently over the course of our preseason practices and stuff, I beat him out. So my first game of my junior year, I'm starting. And I remember being so nervous. I don't remember if this tradition of my junior year started before this game, but I puked before every game.
What?
My junior year. I was so nervous. That was the fear. My body. We played Central Connecticut State. I was the leading scorer. I had 17 points. I hit like 4 threes. I got interviewed after the game. So I was like, okay, leading scorer. Okay, not bad. But the game where it really hit me, we played number 6 Michigan State. This is the Draymond Green era. Draymond, Keith Appling, Brandon Wood, Adrian Payne. They come to Northwestern. We had a blackout, and we won. I had 10 points and 5 rebounds, including, I think, a couple crucial takes to the basket in the second half. And at that point, it's like, when you talk about the mind bully, you have to look at the evidence. Okay, Reggie, number 6 Michigan State, NBA prospects. You started, you played, your head coach who didn't trust you last year trusted you, kept you on the court for, I think it was 28 minutes out of 40. You see, I remember all this stuff. Like, and then the fans stormed the court, and I'm in the crowd yelling, "We going out tonight! We going out tonight!" You know. So like after that, like, hey, like 10 points, 5 rebounds. Your coach trusted you to be on the court against the number 6 team in the nation. Okay, at that moment, I'm like, I'm here. Okay, I'm here. I belong. Still after that, I think my body had just conditioned itself to throw up. So I would still be nervous. I was still throwing up after games, but mentally I was like, no, like I belong here. I've been starting half the season. I'm producing. The only negative voices now are in my own head. My teammates, my coaches, trust me. So you got to go with the evidence at that point.
Going with the evidence. I think obviously you move on. You have a great college career, and you start with pro basketball. But there's something you say there. I jump around a lot. Like I had this thing in my head, like, oh, you got to stay on track. But I'm learning to just speak. We're having a conversation. You said something about evidence there that I kind of want to, land. You said evidence. You start seeing the evidence of why you were great. But when did the perspective shift to where it's like, okay, you spoke on eternal perspective in this form that you sent me over. When did that evidence of you being good start turning to, okay, that's evidence of God's hand on my life. Like anything that I touch, if I work, if I keep going, if I keep the faith, if I keep growing to where it's like, I only played 72 minutes, to where it's like, okay, things happen in my way. He's always provided a door for me. Unfortunately, somebody gets injured, but that's my spot. I always am ready. I'm always on guard. Next man up. That mentality, while those coaches are saying that to me, I'm not just going south with my mind. Like, when did that perspective change to that eternal perspective, to the word of God, to his hand, to that on your life?
So I hit a wall right when I was graduating. So June 2013. I've accomplished all this, right? I have gone from walk-on to leading scorer. I've gone from being perceived as a nerd and getting bullied in elementary school and middle school to, now having achieved success. I win most likely to succeed in high school. I go to Northwestern, very hard academic school, carried 3.3 GPA. My senior year, I presented some sports psychology research at a huge convention in Washington, D.C. that I did with a Northwestern professor. I became the leading scorer at Northwestern. So from the perspective of achievement in the world and American dream, your boy's making it happen, right? Like, no one expected this from me. Basketball's over. I'm graduating, and I'm looking at my life like, what's next? And I thought, okay, up to this point, I've gone farther than I ever thought I would in basketball. Maybe that'll continue. Maybe even I go to the NBA. Maybe even I have a career until I'm 40. And then I'm like, then what? what is all this really going to accomplish? One day I will die. Like, will this really fulfill me? And so I went.
Not to cut you off again, there's because I do think what you're saying is important. I want to kind of expound on that. A lot of the times when we turn to that eternal perspective and we look, God, yeah, you've always been there, but you're really there. It's really in our darkest time. You talked on your mental health spiral. I kind of went through the certain thing. Not kind of, I did. This is why I have Mind Bully podcast where I was in Germany and I go through a tough situation with a tough coach. I thought I wanted to be this player like you. Everything you've accomplished, you've done it outside approval. Same for me. I go over there and I've done everything. 3-story house. I'm making the most money I've ever seen, but I couldn't have the approval from the external. And it started weighing on my own self-worth. And I started thinking, internalizing in my head. I was a person, I never took on what somebody said. You think you're just powering because this is how you are as a person. No, not knowing it's either you think you're driven, but you're really being dragged by this mindset that you had from a kid. So that mindset of not being significant, when I still don't get that significance, I break down. And I always say this, I was in a point where I was, faced with, should I keep suppressing this voice or should I surrender? I was struggling between the two voices. And when I couldn't suppress and strive on, there's nothing to do. It was COVID. I couldn't play, a torn hamstring, a damn concussion. When I couldn't do that, I wanted to surrender. And at times in my life, I wanted to surrender the wrong ways and take my life. But at this moment, at that stage, I surrendered back to my faith. And I say that because it kind of sounds similar when you don't know what to do and you've got it all, worldly things, you've got everything from the outside perspective. It turns to that eternal perspective when you notice like, wait, I'm down and you guys think I'm winning. So what was that kind of like? Yeah.
Having that moment in June 2013 as I'm graduating, I look back at my experiences in church growing up, and we just went every Sunday for the most part. I went in and took my notes like a good kid on the sermon, stashed them away in a box somewhere, never looked at them again. That was kind of how I operated, in a church sense growing up. And then I'm looking at my life, and I'm like, well, number one, I don't know where I'm going. I need some direction and purpose. Number two, I have this great reputation among people at the time, but ever since middle school, maybe even earlier, one of my coping mechanisms have been pornography. Going to that to fill a void, right? Which I think 99.9% of men can attest to in some way, shape, or form. You're going to women or sex
Right.
to fill a void. Never fills it. You just have to keep going back. But I had been doing that for a while. So I'm like, yeah, I know people think, I'm a good guy, I do things the right way, but no, behind closed doors, like, all sorts of stuff is going on in my mind. And I'm trying to fill this void by taking advantage of women in a very bad porn industry that really exploits and abuses them. So for those two reasons, I'm like, okay, there's something here. When I was growing up as a kid, these people in church, like singing with their eyes closed and raising their hands and feeling something I'm not feeling. If anybody has answers that can help me take this next step in life where perfectionism and approval chasing had failed me, because that's what I felt after Northwestern is, now what? Like, where are you going to take me now? Approval and perfectionism, like, and you can't carry me forever. And so who's going to help? It was God. And so, yeah, from there, I told God, I said, whatever happens next in life, like, I'm trying to follow this path towards you. I don't even know what that means. Can you just guide me along this path? Can you just surround me with people that, are on this same path as me? So got an agent, said, I'm going to try this basketball thing. Nothing overseas comes up. Don't get summer league, don't get NBA workouts, nothing. And I didn't really know anything about all that. Like, I'm just a walk-on. Like, I'm just trying to make it. So summer passes, 2013, November, agent puts my name, G League draft. I get drafted 6th round, 4th pick to Idaho Stampede. I was their last draft pick, so that means I'm probably not expected to make the team, right? They had 4 draft picks. I was their last one. Go to training camp, make the team. And as you know how this is in the G League, at least this is how it used to be, they determine where your housing is. They also determine who you house with. So there were 3 other guys on the team. One's name was Jason Ellis. He was an older guy. He was like 30 years old at the time. Remember, I'm like 22, 23 coming out of college. Jason lives with his family in Boise, Idaho. So no one's being housed with him. But he was a professing believer in Christ. There were 2 other guys on the team, Antoine Hood, who went to Air Force, Dallas Lauderdale, who went to Ohio State. I end up getting housed with those guys out of everybody else on the team. And those were the other 2 guys that, professed to follow Jesus. Within 2 weeks, we're like having a Bible study, like going through the book of Joshua. We're talking about our faith. And I'm just like, there's 2 ways I can go with this. I asked to be surrounded by people who are on this path, and I end up housed here with these 2 guys. Or I could say that's coincidence. For me, I don't ascribe to coincidence. So that was the first notion of like, okay, God has responded to me now. And so that just began a whole, journey for me. You talked about, accomplishment and the worldly perspective, and people think you're doing so great, like you were in Germany, right? 3-story house, you're accomplishing things. So God does a whole lot of other stuff that I'm skipping over in my career. I lost all my confidence by my second year of the G League. I was talking about quitting. I had depression for a month. End up with the Reno Bighorns. God sends this random trainer in my life, a little short Filipino dude, almost 5 foot nothing. And all he texts me every day is, Reggie, I believe in you. Reggie, you can make NBA. And this is when my confidence is in shambles. All that happens. Start playing well for Reno. 5th year in the G League, I get called up to Detroit, right? And people would say, man, Reggie again, man. 2-way player with Detroit. Like, after 5 years in the G, he's in the NBA. Like, dang, this dude's living the life. Man, hell no. I was struggling, bro. Within 6 weeks of signing with Detroit, I think it was like January 15th, 2018, I'm in the mental hospital from February 21st to February 27th. So like 6 days, I'm in the hospital, man. And what I had not seen is that I had brought, like, the perfectionism was absolutely ingrained in me. And what had happened is I had met my now wife at the time. And there's probably elements of my childhood and dealing with my parents' divorce that I never knew were in me. So when it comes to relationships, my relationship with my now wife is only my second relationship I've ever had. The other one was in Idaho with a girl for about 4 months. I ended up breaking it off in the midst of like heavy mental health struggles that I was having. Those same mental health struggles start coming around when I meet my now wife. Panic attacks, heavy anxiety. And a lot of it came from like feeling like, wanting to be perfect in a relationship. What does that mean, Norense? Like, how you can't define perfection? Like, there's gonna be issues. Like, she's gonna get mad at you sometimes. Like, you're gonna fail. You're gonna do things the wrong way. But so meeting my now wife at the time and going through all that and feeling like, oh, I shouldn't be in this relationship with her, and can I be a good husband? And I started equating anxiety with God saying no, which is absolutely not true. But because of my first relationship, I had heavy anxiety from that. I felt like God was telling me no. And maybe he was just saying, like, you're not ready at the time. But I took it as no, and I have to completely cut her out of my life, and I gotta do this and do that, and I didn't do this good. And so all that comes back around when I now meet my wife as I'm heading towards Detroit. And so I'm taking all that with me into the hospital, and it seeps out from just the relationship with my wife into everything that I'm doing. Like, I can't do anything right. Like, it becomes crazy things like, okay, if I have to stay in the room today, I can't go to practice. I got to stay and spend time with God. Man, I got to spend 5 days in here straight. If I don't do that, I'm going to hell. Like, crazy, just like off the wall stuff. And because a lot of it is surrounded by relationships, my now wife is caught up in it, because I'm like, I have stuff in my mind like, okay, I've messed up with her so far. So I gotta get myself right. I can't talk to her for 2 years, 2 years, 2 years, 2 years. And then this idea of 2 years, like for anybody who understands OCD and all that stuff just comes ingrained in my mind. And it's like, you got to call her and tell her you can't talk to her for 2 years. It's like, why 2 years? I don't know.
Mhm.
But my brain has just gotten to the point where it's like, it will only trigger this thought and it won't go away until, or at least in my mind, until I do something about it.
I just want to ask you: is that the only place that it showed up in your life in your relationship? Because you're pinpointing the symptoms, kind of those
hmm
type of things. But where else did it show up?
I think it would show up on the court. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. I mean, it's. I haven't used this term up to this point, but the desire for approval and perfectionism results in a lot of people pleasing. So as I'm coming to the Pistons and I spend a lot of time with the G League team, I know how guys can feel about two-way players. Coming down and taking your time. So I'm like, I want to fit in with the guys. So on the court, I'm trying not to be too selfish. I'm trying not to take bad shots, and that was always something that I think held me back in my career is because I didn't want to be viewed as selfish. I want to be the great team guy, the perfect team guy. And I mean, what is that? Like, it's just so perfection just became this just unattainable standard. And it made my mind crazy. So it's showing up in sports, it's showing up in my relationship with my now wife. We weren't even dating, we were just friends, but we knew something was there. And so it all culminates in me, long story short, feeling like I got to a point where I wasn't in control of my body to the point where I came home to my apartment in Grand Rapids one night. And for some reason, I'd had a panic attack earlier that night. It's a crazy long story. I was supposed to go to Detroit. An intern drove me to Detroit. I had a panic attack when I got there. I told coach I can't come to practice. I got to go back to Grand Rapids. I gotta get away. I gotta get away. Intern drives me all the way back to Grand Rapids. And this is like 2.5 hour drive. We're talking about like a 5 hour trip. I get back to my apartment, and on that ride, I kept having thoughts: kill yourself, kill yourself. And I'd never had that before. But then I didn't feel like I could control my body. I got back to my apartment and went straight to the knife drawer, and I pick up the knife. I don't even know what I'm doing, man. I'm like poking my stomach. I'm like holding it to my neck, and I'm like scared because I'm like, why am I doing this? I don't feel like I can stop. I got enough strength to like call my parents, who are about 2 hours away, 2.5 hours away in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I got some help from a church I was going to at the time. A guy from the church came over, sat with me, drove me all the way back to Detroit the same night to get me into the hospital. And it was just the whole point of me sharing all this is like my brain had just got to the point where it is stuck on certain thoughts. And it's like, if I don't resolve this thought in this particular way, the perfectionism, I've now dug myself in a deeper hole, if that makes sense. Now I have to do this thing and this thing on top of the thing I didn't do, or I did do it, but I didn't do it in the time I should have done it. And it's just like
Man.
such a heavy burden, bro. So I'm in the hospital and I think this was the point that God had brought me to. And this is getting back around to a question of yours. This, I think, was a huge point in giving me eternal perspective. This was the moment where I'm like, Reggie, perfectionism and approval seeking and people pleasing has been your guardian up to this point. This has helped you overcome any feelings you had from your parents' divorce, any lack of self value that you had from being bullied as a kid, everything that you've been doing up to this point. This has been your guardian, and this has helped you in some ways. But now you're seeing the bad ends of perfectionism. Now you're seeing the bad ends of approval seeking. They can no longer parent you. You need me, son. That's what I felt God saying to me. So that's how I got broken of the perfectionism, the approval seeking, the people pleasing. Because yes, it will bring me accomplishment, it will bring me achievement. But if you don't have the internal rest of your soul, that's what everybody's looking for, bro. People aren't trying to get money, they're trying to get what money brings you. People aren't trying to get power, they're trying to get what power brings you. Like most people are just looking for security. You're looking for security in a relationship. You're not looking for just sex. You're looking for intimacy, or you're looking for pleasure. You're looking to feel good. And God is saying, I have all that. All these ways that you're trying, sex, relationships, money, American dream, achievement, fame, TikTok followers, like they may fill you for a time, but they're not the root issue. You're trying to take, Advil for your headache, but you're not solving the issue of your soul that makes you have the headaches. You can't alleviate the symptoms. You have to get to the root. And so me going to the hospital was that for me. It's now time for me to allow God to parent me, and with real love, real truth, and joy, and not be parented by
Man,
perfectionism.
Reggie, literally, one, thank you so much for sharing that because I'm sitting here like, man, why? Like, you never know what somebody else goes through. And me being in the locker room, you being in the
Hmm.
locker room, your situation, the people around you probably didn't know. And I'm thinking about anybody watching, your family, your friends, there's people going through real things. And it goes back to what you said. You
Hmm.
prayed. There's a lot of times you forget about the prayers that you made. But when you went to the G League, when you started literally in Idaho, you prayed for, you know, God to surround you with, great people. You had that in roommates, but he didn't stop answering that prayer for them to find you for that
Hmm.
Filipino to be on your mind, to push you to keep having that mindset, having somebody come take you from Detroit to Grand Rapids back to Detroit, and having a community to hold you like while you're in that time, to have your now wife
Hmm.
hold you while you're in that time and stick with you and stick like, that was
Yeah.
powerful, bro. And so thank you for sharing that. I got a question because there's a lot of people, and it's weird. And when I say this, it sounds weird, but it's almost a privilege to know, like, you're a bright individual, to know what it was, the approval, the acceptance, that type of thing that you were always striving for. But if I'm someone listening, um, how do I go?
Hmm.
There's something that you just said, the root cause. How do I go about finding the root cause? If,
Hmm.
these stubborn stories in our head are the narratives that drive us to do the thing, like, how does one go about identifying the story that causes them to do certain things and act a certain way? How do you think, in your opinion, that you do that?
That's a great question. There's two things that come to mind for me. Me personally, just because I love Jesus Christ and I believe the Christian faith and God Himself are the source of life. I believe going to Him helps you to see yourself for who you truly are. If you don't really know the man, if you don't really know his life, if you don't really know what he did and what he said, then you're probably not getting a good idea of who God really is. That's number one, coming to Him through prayer. But number two, practically speaking, if that's not something that's comfortable for you, because I think there's a lot of people who have been hurt by things done in the Christian name. I think therapy is a great start. Therapy needs to continue to be destigmatized. Destigmatized. We all need therapy because we all have blind spots. Like there's parts of you that you can't see. You need other people to to help you see yourself and the world more for how it is. We only have our own perspective, really. I just got done officiating a wedding for two very dear people in my life, and one of the things I said is like, you guys are created in marriage to stand opposite each other. That's what you're doing now. So there's things that she can see over here right now that he can't. There's things that he can see right at that moment that she can't see. Like, I think God designed it purposely because you can't see everything around you, but together they have a more complete picture of everything that's going on. So you have to have people, and I think therapists, like, they're the study of the brain and how people work, psychology, they're schooled in that, and it's okay. And particularly among men, like it's getting better, but there needs to be less of a stigma around therapy. Like, we have to be able to talk to each other. We have to be able to have a space where we can be vulnerable, and really share what's going on inside of us and explore what's going on inside of us in a place that's not judgmental. The word judgment, okay? Because that's a word that goes around. Only God can judge me. Don't judge me. I feel judged. I get that. But when people are saying that, they're meaning judgment in the terms of condemnation. They don't want to be condemned for who they are. But if you and I are playing on a team, I should be able to make certain judgments about you. When I make a judgment, all I'm doing is identifying what's going on. If I say, Norense, you're not making any shots right now, like, I should be able to, hold you accountable in that way. If you get in there with a therapist, they might make some judgments, but it's not in condemnation. It's to help you sift and identify. It's an identification thing. What's really going on inside of me? Most of our lives is lived unconsciously, right? You and I got up in the morning. You probably didn't consciously think, I am brushing my teeth. I am tying my shoes. I am putting on my clothes. You did all that without thinking. So that's probably 95+% of our lives that's lived underneath the surface, not consciously at this moment thinking, my right foot is touching the floor. But all this stuff is in your brain. So we need help. Why did I start acting this way based off of, this memory? That girl left me. Oh, from that point on, I made this decision that I'm not going to let girls hurt me no more. This is why I act the way I do. Like, it's just, there's a huge depth to like our brain and why we act the way we do. And most of the time, it's not a conscious choice. Vulnerability, that's what we have to do.
That's what we have to do, man. There's so many ways I can go. I just learned a lot. Like, I'm sitting there, I'm like, man, let him go. I'm learning. I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, I never thought of that. Yeah. Like, bro, there's, you have a guest like you, being candidly speaking, you want to ask him so many things. I always show my guests, I have this sheet. I have this sheet. I have this sheet. I have all these sheets. I didn't ask any of the questions that's on these sheets, because as you go, I'm like, okay, mental mark. Let me note that. Then note that. It's just like going from the kid that's the walk-on to the USA basketball player of the year, athlete of the year, to ending the game, now to a scout, now a father. What is, in this moment of your life, current day, what are you most excited about?
Is coming to such a free and joyful place on a more consistent basis. Things that used to bother me, the anger, like I talked about, envy. Like, no one wants to live in a perpetually angry, jealous, envy, violent state. Like, who wants to stay in those places? Right. Like, no, I want to be in a state of peace. I want to be in a state of joy. I want to be in a state of rest. To me, those things come from the presence of the God of the universe. So the more I spend time with him, the more I learn about him, the more he infuses it in me. If you want to be warm, you have to get near the fire. If I want to have joy and peace and patience and kindness and those things that I believe come from God, then I have to get close to him. So doing that more and more, and then being able to share it with people. Not everybody's going to want it. But I think everybody wants to be in a state of peace and rest and joy. And I feel like as I'm learning how to get there, I just want to share that with other people. And being in the basketball industry, wanting to help people in the basketball industry, because it's a very stressful place. Not that other places aren't, but, it's hard. Like, some of these draft picks, like, like you said, the Spurs got the #1 draft pick. Like, that's a lot of pressure. Some of these players, some of these coaches, you could get fired. GMs, you get fired at any moment, and everybody's eye is on you. Like, there's so many burdens and anxieties and shackles that come with being in the basketball industry. So how can I help people deal with those and be free from those? So I'm excited about any opportunities I get.
Man, this guy when he speaks, it's like, I feel that. I'm like, bro,
Absolutely.
This is crazy. Like, I'm so appreciative to have you on this platform. I think, man, you helped me a lot. I'm just like, oh my goodness, through this whole, I'm not kidding. Like, I'm like, this is impacting me. So I know what you talked about, conversation, open up a space. My last question, my final question that I ask every guest, overcoming your mind bully, the practical steps to when you have that negative voice, work to overcome that. How do you overcome your mind bully?
Number one, I don't do it as much as I used to, but meditation. Specifically, I use the Headspace app. And it just gives your mind a break. Like I talked about earlier, your subconscious is always going. Like, what do I have to do next? This person said that. Oh, what's going on in that show? But meditation trains you to just let your brain not work for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So that's one thing. Number 2 is my prayer time, connecting with God. Number 3 is I have memorized several scriptures that pertain to my particular struggles, anxiety, fear, lack of confidence. I referenced anger earlier. And I will say those out loud. My wife would make fun of me because sometimes I would be in the shower and I would just say scripture out loud. And the thing about that is, if you're not into scripture, it doesn't have to be scripture, but it needs to be positive self-talk out loud. I don't know if the science has caught up to this yet. I firmly believe it's going to come out at some point that there is power in words. I wish I could find the link to this, but I did read about an experiment where a scientist said negative words to jars of water and then said positive words to jars of water. And after a certain amount of time, the words that he had said, or the jars that he had said negative words to, the water became discolored, but the positive words was like bright and clear. It's very interesting. I believe words have power. So, we get caught up in our narratives that go on in our head, and we're just thinking, and then they become entwined with our emotions. But when you get things out in the open externally, you say them out loud to a person, to God, to yourself, I think it just has so much power. Even just 5 minutes, I'm going to read these scriptures that specifically pertain to fear. Now they're in me. Now they're in that subconscious. So now maybe sometimes those are going to come out instead of the running narrative. I don't think I'm good. I don't think I can play. Well, no, now it is, no, I'm more than a conqueror through Christ who loves me. That comes out. So now I have the war of words coming out, but saying them out loud, I think is really powerful. So
meditation, positive words, scripture, turn into the spirit. You said a lot more than 3 tactics, but any tactics will do for anybody listening. I love what you said there. You speak the thing out. I say it, and I said it a long time ago. Now I'll say it more that you remind me. It's to speak it out. And I always say interrogate the thought, because the words that you say, let there be light, there was light. Like, there's a system here that they're said through your words, whatever you say.
Right.
It's like maps. Let's say the thoughts in your head, they steer where you're going to go. But as soon as you say it, that's how you arrive at a destination. Yes. I always say, I take every thought captive unto the obedience of Jesus Christ, cast down every imagination and every high and lofty thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. Fear exalts itself against the knowledge of God. Anxiety exalts itself against the knowledge of God. Lack of confidence exalts itself against the knowledge of God. Inferior complex, exalts itself against the knowledge of God. Like, I say that every single morning, several times a day, along with other scriptures, but it's so powerful what you said, to say those things, to speak those things. So it's like, any thought, idea, suggestion that comes against the knowledge of God, it's already been taken care of. And your authority. There's a preaching session, but it's the truth session as well. So long story short, bro, thank you so much. I know you helped me a lot. You'll help so many people with this podcast. So thank you, bro, for joining the podcast, bro.
Appreciate the platform to share my story, man. This was an awesome time, and it was good for my spirit.
Love, bro. Sweet. Thank you.